Okay, so we're going to start with hemopoiesis. So hemopoiesis is how we make blood. It's called the production of blood. Okay, and basically, usually we're talking about erythropoiesis, leukopoiesis. So we're talking about the formed elements and how we make them. Okay, so the first thing you need to think about is where is blood made. Okay, so they say hemopoietic tissues produce blood cells. So I have those cells listed before, or the tissues actually listed below. So the first thing is liver. Okay, so before you're born, the liver is making your blood cells. Okay, after you're born, the liver stops making blood cells. Okay, then the spleen is going to make white blood cells, so lymphocytes. It's going to be involved in that. Red bone marrow, it's going to make all of them. Okay, so it makes all of them. The progenitor cell, okay, so the progenitor, this is the cell, so it's like the pre-cell, it's the cell that comes first. Okay, the cell that's going to give rise to all the other blood cells is called a hemo, okay, so blood, right? Cyto, which would be cell, and blast, so that's like an immature cell. So a hemocytoblast, that's the progenitor cell, and it gives rise to all the different kinds of formed elements. Okay, so they're also known as pluripotent stem cells. Okay, so sometimes they call pluripotent stem cells PPSC. Okay, so PPSC, and the books go back and forth. Sometimes they call them hemocytoblasts. Sometimes they call them pluripotent stem cells. So these are cells that are going to develop into blood cells. Okay, so there's one cell and they can become red. Okay, they could become white. They could become platelets. Okay, depending on what environmental triggers occur. Okay, so here I have it down here. Hemocytoblasts could either become myeloid, hemopoietic cells, so they're responsible for blood cell formation in the bone marrow, or lymphoid. Lymphoid is red blood cell or blood cell formation in the lymphatic organs. Now, if you look at your textbook, page 709 has a really, it's one of those full page things, and it has how all of the cells are produced. And I don't want you to get hung up on all the details of that, but you just look at it and try to get the idea of what the hemocytoblast is and how it can be differentiated to become different cells. You don't have to memorize every step of that. Okay, now, first we're going to talk about reds. So red blood cells are erythrocytes. Okay, so you guys know that. Here's the capillary. Okay, so this is itty bitty. Okay, this is a capillary. So this, I think, is a scanning electron micrograph. So they're magnified really, really a lot, right? These are the cells, or this is the cell. Okay, so if you look at a red blood cell, to me it looks like a bagel that they didn't push the hole all the way through. So if you look at it from the side, it kind of looks like this, which it's hard to draw with the stylus. So this is the thin part in the middle, and then this is the fat edge. Okay, the reason that they're shaped like this is it increases the surface area to volume ratio. So that means that they can carry a lot of oxygen. They can carry a lot of gas. A lot of oxygen. And it's easy for diffusion to take place. So lots of surface area. So you have lots of places where diffusion can occur. Okay, so two principal functions of red blood cells. One is to carry oxygen from the lungs to the tissue and pick up carbon dioxide from the tissue and bring it to the lungs so that we can get rid of it. Okay, if you don't have enough red blood cells, it could be deadly. Okay, so it could kill you because you don't have enough oxygen to the tissue. So if oxygen is down, right, ATP goes down. And if you don't have any, you can't make any ATP, what happens? Okay, you die. Which that's my happy story. Okay. All right, now characteristics of red blood cells. So I have it again. Disc-shaped cell with a thick rim. So this is weird how this messes it up when it gets imported. Like some of the spacing, the formatting gets messed up, but that's okay. So think bagel without the hole punched through. Now, something that makes red blood cells very unique is that as they're developing, they're losing all their organelles, okay, almost all their organelles. So they don't have any mitochondria. Okay, so if you don't have any mitochondria, then you have no cellular respiration, right? No cellular respiration. And if you don't have cellular respiration, then you have no ATP. Okay, so no mitochondria. They don't have a nucleus, and they don't have DNA. Okay, so if you don't have that, then that tells you no protein synthesis. Okay. So basically, these are like disposable bags, okay? And what they're actually going to contain is they're going to contain this protein that's called hemoglobin. Okay, hemoglobin is going to carry oxygen around, but we'll get there. Okay, so first, you definitely need to know this. This makes these cells totally different from any kind of cell. So no mitochondria, so no cellular respiration, no nucleus, no DNA. Okay, now blood type, so like A, B, O, RH. Blood type is determined by what's on the surface of the red blood cells. Okay, so they're glycoproteins and glycolipids. So if you go back, so a glycoprotein is a carbohydrate with protein attached to it, and glycolipid is a carbohydrate with lipids attached to it. Okay, and they're on the surface, and we'll talk about this more. The cytoskeleton of the red blood cells actually makes the membrane durable and resilient so that it can fit through these little tiny capillaries and not be destroyed. Okay, the idea is that these cells can stretch and bend and go through these little capillaries without breaking. If they break, it causes some problems if they're not supposed to be breaking. Okay, now here's the function. Okay, so gas transport is the major function. Okay, so here's the same thing I said like 2 slides ago. So they have increased surface area to volume ratio. So they have increased surface area to volume because they don't have any organelles, and this is going to increase the rate of diffusion. So they can get gases in and out faster. Okay, now 33% of the cytoplasm of a red blood cell is hemoglobin, and we're going to look at the molecule hemoglobin on the next slide. So hemoglobin is a protein. Okay, and it's designed, oops, sorry, I thought I had a better stylus here. Designed to transport oxygen. Okay, and I'll show you the structure so you can see it. There's so much hemoglobin in one red blood cell. It's crazy. So there's 280 million hemoglobin molecules in one red blood cell. Okay, we have between 4 and 6 million red blood cells in a microliter. Okay, so this is a mu in a microliter of blood. Okay, so a microliter is a teeny tiny, it's a drop. Okay, so we have a ton of hemoglobin in our body. Okay, now, hemoglobin, it's going to take oxygen to the tissue, and it's also going to help with carbon dioxide transport. Another thing that red blood cells have that other cells don't have is they have carbonic anhydrase. So carbonic anhydrase is an enzyme that it's going to catalyze a reaction. The reaction, it's actually CO2 plus water. And then we put carbonic anhydrase in here, and we get H2CO, CO3, and that breaks apart, and we get hydrogen ions and H2CO3, CO, yep, 3 negative. HCO3 negative. Sorry, that looks like a mess. Okay, but we're going to go over this when we get to the respiratory chapter. So right now, just kind of know that this exists. Okay, and it's going to catalyze this important reaction of how we can get carbon dioxide out of your blood. We'll talk about this equation more when we get to the respiratory system. It's going to be really important, but so you don't have to memorize it right now. I should have waited to write it down. Okay, so hemoglobin. So and we abbreviate hemoglobin H, capital H little b. So each hemoglobin molecule consists of 4 protein groups. Okay, so globins. So here's one that's like mustard color. There's another one. Okay, and then we have the blue ones. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 4 protein globins. Okay, now in the middle of each of those globins is a heme. Okay, and heme is actually a pigment. So the heme is what's on here that's red. So it's what makes your blood red. Okay, so each of those little star-looking things, that's heme. Okay, it's a lipid. Pigments are usually lipids. Okay, now in the middle of it, it has an iron molecule. Okay, so if you took one of these red things and wrote out the chemistry of it, the chemicals of it, this is what it would look like. Okay, this is what this in this blue box. So now the iron is in the middle. The iron has a high affinity for oxygen. Okay, so this is where the oxygen is going to bind. Okay, so if you've ever been anemic and they say, oh, you need more iron. Well, the iron, oops, come on. The iron is a key, now my stylus isn't working at all. The iron is a key component of hemoglobin. Okay, so you need the iron to make the hemoglobin, which is going to carry the oxygen and your red blood cells. Okay, so I think, so the globins, 4 protein chains. The 2 are called alpha. So these would be alpha. 2 are beta. So when we carry CO2 in our blood, some of it is actually going to be bound to these proteins. Okay, now we have 2 different kinds of hemoglobin. We have adult hemoglobin and fetal hemoglobin. Well, let's talk about that in a minute. I think this is getting too long, so I'm going to stop and save it.